At 61, Sandra Bullock finally revealed the truth about the one thing Jesse James did that made their marriage impossible to save. It all came down to just 10 days. That was all the time she had to celebrate winning the biggest award of her career before her personal life exploded across every headline in America. One moment she was standing on the Oscar stage, holding a golden statue while the world applauded. The next, she was watching the life she thought she had built collapse in public. But there was something almost nobody knew. Hidden behind the flashing cameras and red carpet smiles was a tiny newborn baby boy. While America celebrated Sandra's Oscar victory, she and Jesse had quietly welcomed their adopted son, Louis. The adoption had been kept completely secret. No press release, no magazine cover, no announcement to the world. They wanted those first precious weeks to belong only to their family. And that is what makes this story so devastating. When Sandra stood on stage thanking Jesse for changing her life, he already knew the secret that would soon destroy everything. He knew there was a newborn sleeping at home. He knew they had just become parents. And according to what later emerged, the betrayal was already happening. For years, Sandra refused to tell her side of the story. Tabloids invented quotes. Gossip magazines claimed she was falling apart behind closed doors. Her team publicly denied many of those stories. Sandra would not let anyone else write her narrative. Not the press, not Hollywood, not even Jesse. Then, slowly, over the course of more than a decade, she began revealing pieces of the truth. And when people finally put those pieces together, they realized this had never been just a story about cheating. It was a story about timing, about motherhood, about the moment a woman decides she can never go backward. Hashtag the woman who waited for a family. By 2003, Sandra Bullock was already one of the most beloved actresses in the world. She had starred in hit movies, earned millions of fans, and built a career most people could only dream of. Yet behind the success was a quieter truth. She desperately wanted a family. Friends later described her as someone who never wanted to settle just because she was getting older. She would rather be alone than choose the wrong partner. Then she met Jesse James. Ironically, they met because Sandra was trying to do something kind. A child in her family idolized Jesse and his motorcycle shop, West Coast Shoppers, so she arranged a surprise visit. She wasn't expecting to meet the man she would eventually marry. Jesse seemed completely different from the polished Hollywood crowd. He worked with his hands. He looked rough around the edges. He didn't appear interested in fame the way many people in Los Angeles did. Sandra later admitted that what attracted her most was how honest he seemed. That word would come back years later in the cruelest possible way. Hashtag the marriage. In July 2005, they married in a private ceremony on a ranch. Sandra was 40 years old and believed she had finally found the life she had been waiting for. She didn't just marry Jesse. She embraced his complicated world. He had 3 children from previous relationships, and when one of his former partners went to prison, Sandra stepped in without hesitation. She attended court hearings, helped with custody issues, managed school responsibilities, and became deeply involved in the children's lives. People close to the family said she threw herself into motherhood with the same commitment she brought to her career. To Sandra, this wasn't a temporary role. This was the family she had always wanted. Hashtag the secret adoption. By late 2009, Sandra and Jesse had begun the process of adopting a baby from New Orleans. In January 2010, little Louis entered their lives. They kept the adoption completely private because they wanted those first months to be sacred and protected. For Sandra, becoming a mother was one of the happiest moments she had ever experienced. Then came award season. In January 2010, she won the Golden Globe for The Blind Side. Standing before the world, she emotionally thanked Jesse and said that for the first time in her life, she felt like someone truly had her back. The audience applauded. Jesse smiled proudly. America watched what looked like the perfect love story. But according to everything that later surfaced, the affair had already begun. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag 10 days after the Oscar. On March 7th, 2010, Sandra won the Academy Award for Best Actress. Cameras captured Jesse wiping away tears as his wife made history. To millions of viewers, they looked like the happiest couple in Hollywood. They had 10 days left. On March 17th, a tabloid published explosive allegations from tattoo model Michelle "Bombshell" McGee, who claimed she had been involved in a months-long affair with Jesse James. It wasn't described as a one-time mistake. It was described as an ongoing relationship that overlapped with Sandra filming her Oscar-winning movie, with the adoption process, and with the first months of their newborn son's life. And then more women came forward. One story became several. What had looked like a single scandal suddenly appeared to be a pattern. Hashtag, 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 the disappearance. Within days, Sandra canceled international appearances and disappeared from public view. The media assumed she was hiding from humiliation. They were wrong. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting her baby. For 6 weeks, one of the most famous women on Earth vanished while photographers searched for her everywhere. During that time, she focused entirely on caring for 2-month-old Louis and keeping him away from the storm surrounding their marriage. Then, in April 2010, she reappeared on the cover of People magazine, holding her son for the first time. In a single moment, she revealed 2 things to the world. She had become a mother, and she had filed for divorce. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag the decision. What happened next said more than any press conference ever could. Sandra completed Louis's adoption as a single mother. She made sure he would have a stable home, even if that home no longer included Jesse. The divorce was finalized quietly in June 2010. No public war, no tell-all interviews, no revenge campaign. Jesse later admitted he had destroyed an amazing marriage and thrown away an extraordinary life. Years afterward, he would say that losing the chance to raise Louis was one of the most painful consequences of everything that happened. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag what Sandra finally revealed. For years, people assumed the marriage ended because of infidelity. But Sandra eventually explained that the deeper issue was what the betrayal threatened to do to her child. She revealed that during those painful weeks, she kept asking herself one question: how do you process grief and not hurt your child in the process? Then she gave the answer that changed how many people understood the entire story. My obligation was to him and not tainting the first year of his life with my grief. That was the moment people realized why the marriage was never going to survive. It wasn't simply that Jesse had cheated. It was that his choices brought chaos, humiliation, and heartbreak into the home of a newborn child. Sandra decided her son would not grow up surrounded by that pain. She chose peace over repairing a broken relationship. She chose motherhood first. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag the life she built afterward. Years later, Sandra expanded her family again by adopting a daughter, Layla. She continued building the life she had always wanted, quietly and on her own terms. She earned another Oscar nomination. She found a relationship that embraced her children. And when life later brought her another profound loss, she stepped away from Hollywood to focus on what mattered most: being a mother. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag the real best moment of her life. People often assume the greatest moment of Sandra Bullock's life was winning the Academy Award. But looking back, that wasn't the moment that defined her. The moment that defined her was walking into her home, holding her 2-month-old son, and deciding that no matter what happened to her marriage, her children would always come first. Jesse James admitted he threw away an extraordinary life. Sandra Bullock took the pieces that remained and built something even stronger. And that is why so many people still admire her today.